Poland is no longer just a country in Central Europe. It's becoming something much bigger, Europe's military front line. And here's the wild part. They're not just buying tanks or raising flags, they're building the largest army in Europe. Mandatory military training, fortress-like borders, and 500,000 troops on standby. But here's the question. Is Poland securing peace or preparing for war? Let's rewind the clock and understand how this unlikely transformation began. The shadow of the past. Poland knows what it means to live in the shadow of empires. For much of the 20th century, it didn't control its own destiny. After World War II, Poland fell firmly behind the Iron Curtain, becoming a Soviet satellite state. Its government, economy, and even media were heavily influenced, if not outright dictated, by Moscow. It was a time of scarcity and silence. The country was run under a communist system, a centrally planned economy, where the state decided what was produced, how much, and for how much it could be sold. On paper, everyone had work. In reality, inflation was spiraling, store shelves were often empty, and even basics like meat or sugar were hard to find. More than anything, people lacked freedom, political, economic, and personal. Dissent wasn't tolerated. Surveillance was widespread, and any resistance to Soviet control came with serious consequences. But even under oppression, Poland never forgot its identity. There was always a current of resistance bubbling beneath the surface, from the Solidarity movement in the 1980s to countless protests and strikes that defied Soviet authority. Then, in 1989, history shifted. The Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union began to unravel, and Poland, after decades of being told who to be, finally had a choice. It didn't hesitate. Poland pivoted westward with determination. It embraced capitalism, democracy, and integration with the broader European community. The transition was painful at times, but the results were extraordinary. From 1989 to 2018, Poland's GDP surged by 830%. It transformed from a struggling post-communist state into the fastest-growing economy in Europe. It joined NATO in 1999 and the European Union in 2004, solidifying its place in the Western Alliance. For the first time in modern history, Poland's future seemed stable, prosperous, even secure. But history has a way of circling back. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia. In 2014, it annexed Crimea. And in 2022, it launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Poland suddenly found itself on the edge again, not just of Europe, but of war. Its hard-won progress and peace now sat uncomfortably close to a growing conflict. And just like that, the past wasn't past anymore. It was knocking on Poland's eastern door. The Belarus border crisis. The next flashpoint didn't come from Russia directly. It came from its closest ally, Belarus. In 2021, massive protests erupted across Belarus after a disputed presidential election. President Alexander Lukashenko claimed victory, but tens of thousands of Belarusians believed the vote was rigged. The government cracked down violently. Protesters were jailed. Opposition leaders were silenced. Europe quickly condemned the regime and imposed sanctions. But Lukashenko struck back, not with tanks or missiles, but with something far more unconventional. In what many now call hybrid warfare, Belarus began relaxing visa requirements for people from the Middle East, particularly from Iraq and Syria. Once these individuals arrived in Minsk, they were allegedly guided, sometimes even transported, by Belarusian forces to the border with Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. A sleepy forested border was suddenly turned into a geopolitical pressure point. In a matter of weeks, the number of migrants attempting to cross into Poland surged from dozens to thousands. Camps formed in the woods. Tensions rose. International media descended on the scene. Poland's response was swift and firm. 15,000 soldiers and border guards were deployed to control the situation. And perhaps, most controversially, Poland began building a barrier, not just a fence, but a steel wall, that would run through some of Europe's oldest and most protected forests, including the Białowieża Forest, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Environmentalists were outraged. Human rights groups raised alarm. But for Poland, the message was clear: this is our line and we will defend it. But this wasn't a one-time emergency. It was a warning shot. A signal that Europe's eastern border was now a new kind of battleground, where politics, security, migration, and warfare collide. And this, as it turned out, was only the beginning. The Baltic powder keg. To understand Poland's rising anxiety, you only need to glance at a map. To its northeast lie the three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They are NATO members, but small and geographically isolated, and they all share borders with Russia. Now here's the key detail. There is only one land route connecting the Baltic states to the rest of NATO. It's a narrow strip, just 65 kilometers wide, cutting through northeastern Poland between Lithuania and Belarus. This is the Suwałki Gap, and it may be the most fragile and strategically important corridor in all of Europe. To the north of the gap lies Kaliningrad, a heavily militarized Russian exclave. It's home to Russia's Baltic Fleet, missile launch systems, and tens of thousands of troops. To the south lies Belarus, still firmly aligned with Moscow, and essentially functioning as a proxy state for Russian influence. If conflict were ever to erupt in the Baltics, most military analysts agree. Russia would try to close the Suwałki Gap immediately, effectively cutting off the Baltic states from the rest of NATO. That would isolate Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and that would drag Poland instantly and inescapably into war. This isn't some distant possibility. It's a scenario that NATO has actively wargamed for years. And for Poland, it's not just a theory, it's a ticking clock. So Poland decided to prepare. Because in this part of Europe, being a bridge means also being a target. And when both ends of that bridge are armed to the teeth, one wrong move could ignite the entire region. This is why Poland no longer sees itself as just a member of NATO, but as the shield standing between Europe and the fire. Fortress Poland, a nation, rearms. Poland isn't just preparing for war, it's transforming itself into a fortress. Today, Poland spends a higher percentage of its GDP on defense than any other European country, surpassing even longtime military heavyweights like the UK and France. But this isn't just about budgets or buying new toys. Poland is building an army, the largest in Europe. In 2022, its armed forces numbered around 120,000 soldiers. By 2025, that number crossed 200,000. By the mid-2030, Poland aims for at least 300,000 troops, and possibly as many as 500,000. To get there, Poland is taking a bold and controversial step. Starting in 2026, military training will be mandatory for all adult men. Women will be allowed to volunteer. It's a strategy inspired by Finland, where 1 in 5 citizens are trained reservists, ready to mobilize if conflict arises. This approach isn't just about manpower, it's about mindset. Poland is creating a people's army, supported by modern tanks, advanced artillery systems, missile defense, drones, and cutting-edge surveillance. And to protect its vulnerable eastern border, Poland launched Project East Shield, a sweeping defensive network of minefields, anti-tank traps, bunkers, and reinforced positions stretching across its frontiers with Belarus, Ukraine, Lithuania, and Russia. This isn't just national defense. This is Poland declaring, if you threaten Europe, you'll meet us first. In doing so, Poland is turning its geography, once a weakness, into its strongest line of defense. The bigger picture, leadership or provocation. Poland's rearmament hasn't just reshaped its military, it's reshaped its identity. At home, support for this militarization is overwhelming. Surveys show that 3 out of 4 Poles support increased defense spending. What's more striking? Over a third of citizens say they're willing to cut social programs or tax the wealthy if that's what it takes to fund a stronger military. This isn't just about fear, it's about pride and a shifting sense of national purpose. More and more Poles are calling for less dependence on Brussels and more autonomy in Warsaw. There's growing skepticism of Western European leadership, particularly from Germany and France, who many believe have been slow to respond to rising threats from the East. So Poland is stepping into that vacuum, not waiting, not asking, leading. But with leadership comes a difficult question. Is Poland preparing for peace or provoking a fight? Supporters argue that Poland is doing what's necessary. They believe peace comes from strength and that showing weakness invites aggression. To them, building up the military is an act of defense, not defiance. But critics, including some within NATO, worry that this path may escalate tensions. That fortifying the eastern border, expanding troop numbers, and adopting a fortress mindset might make Russia feel cornered. And in geopolitics, a cornered power is a dangerous one. So, where does that leave Poland? Is it becoming the protector of Europe or playing with fire? The truth may lie somewhere in between, but one thing is clear. Poland is no longer just reacting to history, it's trying to shape it. and the rest of Europe is watching very closely. So, what do you think? Is Poland making the right call by preparing for the worst, or should it trust in diplomacy, even when the stakes feel sky high? This story is about more than one country. It's about the future of Europe. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments.